I've been a software engineer for the best part of a decade. As a hobby, I've been working on indie game development in my free time, and I have years of projects sat on my hard drive, likely never to see the light of day. That seemed like a waste to me, so I thought I'd make a video about every game I've created over the last few years whilst working as a full-time software engineer. I hope you enjoy. Now, my first game was actually made many years back. It was created as part of a university project, so I can't take all the credit for everything, but my role was the lead developer, so I contributed a lot to the overall game. The goal was to create a retro-style RPG, heavily influenced by various RPG games I've played growing up. It was written in Java using the LIBGDX engine, with the game assets being purchased from itch.io. The game features 3 playable classes, a warrior, mage, and archer. Each have their own unique abilities. The game is divided into 3 main areas, each with their own boss. The goal is to defeat all 3 bosses and complete a number of side quests without dying. If you die, you lose everything and start again. The combat system is quite simple. Each character has 4 unique abilities and a basic melee auto attack. The game was animated using sprite-based animations, which is how I implemented the combat abilities. The game also featured a basic inventory and item system, although it was a bit ropey. NPCs would also drop items, and you could loot them to gain power-ups that would help you as you go on in the game. The game also featured a quest system and NPC dialogue, but that wasn't something I worked on myself. Although the game is a bit rough around the edges, I'm still very proud of this, especially as it was my first game. One of the next games I worked on was an implementation of a famous game called Conway's Game of Life. This is a basic game based on cellular automation. Each cell has a rule that determines whether it's on or off based on the state of the neighboring cells. I created an implementation of this in Java using the LIBGDX engine. In the game, you can spawn in a few of the common patterns that have some really interesting behaviors, and using them you can interact and influence the simulation. It's pretty simple. It was about a weekend's worth of work, and it started off as a test automation exercise, and I got a bit carried away. But it was fun. Fast forward some time now, and I'd been pretty inactive in game development as I'd been progressing my main career. But I really wanted to get back to doing some game development, so I decided to book a week holiday and have my own game jam. I opted to create a really unique game that is unlike anything that's ever been created before. You play as a little ship in space, shooting waves and waves of enemies, but this one's 3D. I gave myself exactly 1 week to finish this. Unlike the last games, I actually created this using Unity with C#. Most of the assets in this game were a combination of just primitive shapes that I fused together, but also some free assets from the Unity asset store. The game features a few basic abilities and weapons. The player can shoot projectiles, place temporary shields, and also heal the ship that they're on. It features a wave-based enemy spawn system that would increase in difficulty as time went on. As the difficulty increased, different combinations of enemies would spawn. The game ends when either the mothership is destroyed or the player dies. Overall, I was quite happy with this, and I found it quite fun to play. Now we fast forward some time again. I wanted to challenge myself to create something big this time that would take several months. It wasn't with the goal to publish anything, it was just to test myself to see if I would enjoy working on a big project. I decided to try and create a voxel game similar to Minecraft and other games in the genre. It'd be a survival-based game where you could mine and build anything you want. The goal was to teach myself aspects of game development that I would need to create the kind of games I wanted to create. And again, this one was written in Unity using C#. I created all of the assets myself for this, except for the audio, which I added in later. The game features a procedurally generated world with biomes, cave systems, and rare mineral spawns such as diamonds. Each biome is slightly different. There's a desert, grass, snow and jungle biome, and each have their own subtle differences. There's also naturally occurring rivers and lakes. The water's also dynamic and it will move based on how the environment changes. This is one feature that I'm particularly happy with. As the player, you can mine for resources and use these to build whatever you like. To add to the element of survivability, I added a number of NPCs that would roam around the world and chase you if you get too close. The combat system's very basic, but I didn't want to spend too much time on that as this game was more of a proof of concept. There's also a basic day and night cycle that would make it a little bit more realistic and add to that element of survivability. There's also some basic audio with ambient sound effects as you move around the world, music, and also sounds for different actions. There's also a few other features I added, such as a simple inventory system, and also small quality of life features like animating the blocks when you destroy them and things like that. One thing I was really happy with was that this was my first time really using Blender. So I modeled, rigged and animated these characters myself, and also learned how to add equipable items and bake these into the animations. Overall, I was really happy with this. The development process for this spanned several months, and I was able to push myself really beyond what I thought I was capable of. And it gave me a great confidence that I actually could create the style of game that I wanted to. Now again, after about a year of hiatus whilst I was working on my career and switching jobs, I decided to set the challenge of creating my first commercial game, which is what I'm working on now. This game doesn't have a name yet, but it's a casual RPG game based in a voxel world. It takes elements from a lot of games that I love and combines them together in a unique way to try and create something new. The emphasis in this game is freedom and creativity, with the game featuring a building system as one of its core mechanics. I'm documenting the progress of this game here on my channel, and I'm loving that process so far. I work on this purely in my free time around my day job. The game is being developed in Unity with C#. With this game, I want to create as many of the assets as I can myself, but the main goal is to finish this game in a realistic timeline, so I may end up purchasing some assets where it makes sense. The game is a few months into development at this point, and the main feature developed so far is the building system, which has taken me some time. The goal is to develop a procedural world with areas that are pre-constructed. This means I can design the look and feel of some places, but also add a lot of unique content that adds a lot of replayability by making use of procedural generation. Now what you're seeing is a very early version of the game, and most of the effort so far has been around building the system that will facilitate the content creation, such as the level editor, item system, and making it easy to add new blocks and materials and things like that. As I say, I am documenting this on my channel and trying to make regular devlogs on the process. So that's all of the main games that I've been working on, but it only tells part of the story. There's also a number of small games and mechanics that I've worked on along the way that aren't fully fledged games, but I think will still be interesting to include in the video. The first example is a fire-breathing dragon that I implemented in Unity. The idea was this was going to be a survival game based on waves of enemies. It's similar to the space shooter game, but I only ended up actually creating the dragon and I moved on to another project. Another experiment which I spent quite a bit of time on was a 2D physics platformer based on voxels. This was originally going to be a full game, but I pivoted to my current idea before finishing this. This looked very primitive as I didn't spend much time working on the artwork, but one of the cool features was that it featured physics and voxels. When you destroy things in the world, things would fall and move around. The idea was that this mechanic would allow for emergent gameplay and give the player creative ways to complete missions in the game, as opposed to just a linear storyline. Now this is still an idea that I really like the sound of, and I might go back to this at some point in the future and finish it, but for now I've put it on the shelf. Another experiment I worked on was generating these procedural islands using voxels. Now this was an adaptation of the Voxel game I worked on previously, but this time I wanted to update that to generate islands, and around this I was going to create a basic survival game, but I never ended up actually creating the game part, I just created the world generation. Next up is one of the oldest games in my archive. It was one of the very first things I did in Unity, and it's basic but it's fun. I wanted to explore creating a combat system and learn how they work in terms of colliders and animations and so on. I added a controllable character and used some models and animations from Mixamo and implemented a bunch of fun fighting mechanics and animations. I added some very basic AI and implemented a questionable combat system where you could knock each other down after taking so many hits. It's very rough, but it was my first experience with 3D models and animations, and it taught me a lot and answered a lot of questions I had at the time, so it was worth doing. And that covers most of the things that I've created along my indie game journey. I hope that's been fairly insightful. Overall, if there's one thing to take away from this, it's that the path to creating games is different for everyone. Along the way, there's been lots of frustration and feeling like I wasn't doing anything worthwhile with the games I was making. I was doing a lot of individual small ideas, and it kind of felt like it was for nothing. But looking back, it got me to where I am now, and I'm glad I did all of this. It's been a scrappy journey, but a great one all the same, and I'm proud of some of the creations and Frankensteins that I've created along the way. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have, please consider subscribing and giving the video a like. I would really appreciate it. And as always, I welcome any feedback on what you like and also what I can improve on, so please feel free to comment what you think. Thank you.